Football never sleeps.
Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral YouTube show all about Notre Dame football, and complete with theme music from our friend piano man Steve Lundgren. My name is Eric Hansen. The guy in the Brady Bunch box next to me is dual threat Tyler James. Lots to talk about today after Marcus Freeman's Monday press conference and the 28-3 win over Miami on Saturday. We have Jaden Mickey getting ready to hit the transfer portal at the end of the season. He's going to redshirt the rest of this season. We have injury updates and how they'll come into play and Saturday's showdown with number 15 Louisville. Talk about the ongoing saga of Riley Leonard and how that dynamic might play out in the Louisville game, how the offensive line will be tested. And along the way, we'll take your questions live. So start filling up the question queue. It's all ahead tonight on this edition of
Football never sleeps.
All right. Well, it's a make or break week for Notre Dame on the football field, and things are heating up in recruiting too. That makes it a great time to be a subscriber to InsideNDSports.com. So give us a try with a 30-day free trial. That's exclusive to our YouTube audience. Use promo code NDYT when you sign up to get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us on the Insider Lounge, which is where we spend a lot of our time. Our community shares all their opinions, and we drop our inside information there first. Make sure you're subscribed to us here on our YouTube channel as well, which is free. It allows you to get questions in during the show. We want to hear from you in the comments, even if you're not watching us live and you're watching on replay. So make sure you comment then. So make sure you click subscribe right now, and let's have a good show. All right, Eric, first I wanted to start with the hits to Notre Dame's roster that were revealed again today. Head coach Marcus Freeman and junior cornerback Jaden Mickey announced today that Mickey has decided to opt out of the rest of the regular season, preserve a year of eligibility, explore the transfer portal, and graduate from Notre Dame in the spring. How big of a loss is Mickey, and do you have confidence that Leonard Moore and or Carson Hobbs can step up?
Well, let's start with how big of a loss is Jaden Mickey. I think it's a tremendous loss. Not that Notre Dame doesn't have great starting corners, but Jaden Mickey played a lot for a guy that wasn't a starter. He was also really great insurance in case one of those other two cornerbacks go down. Christian Gray can play either side pretty well, so can Ben Morrison. So, Jaden Mickey, his specialty is the field side. So if either one went down, Christian Gray, let's say, could fill in for Morrison. Jaden Mickey becomes a starter. And then behind them now, you only have two freshmen. Now you have some other options, guys that have played cornerback before in Rod Hurd II, who was a cornerback at Northwestern, played mostly nickel. And then the nickel, Jordan Clark, has some cornerback in his background. But yeah, I think it hurts. And the surprise factor, I mean, Jaden Mickey's been through a lot. His mom died on the eve of the Sun Bowl last December from breast cancer, I believe. And a lot of emotion. The kid wanted to play in that game and did play in the Sun Bowl. I think he was very disappointed when he didn't win the starting job this spring. And I don't think he could get past that disappointment. When you look at the future, you say, well, gosh, Ben Morrison is probably going to be a draft pick in the spring. He'll leave after his junior year, and Jaden Mickey would be starting as a senior. So it doesn't make sense a little bit, but maybe there's more to it, and he just needs to start over somewhere else and just get a fresh start. You gave me a lot to chew on, so I'm going to let you comment on those two things. Then let's talk about the two freshmen.
Yeah.
So it doesn't turn into the Eric Hansen monologue.
First, let me clean up that Mickey's mom had colon cancer. That's what she had had for a few years before she sadly passed late last year. And I do think it is a loss for Notre Dame to not have Mickey out there. I think Mickey's career has been filled with ups and downs, and I'm not necessarily sure that he fulfilled the potential we thought he may have had. And I'm sure that losing the sort of off-season battle with Christian Gray wasn't the most uplifting news for Jaden Mickey. We actually spoke to him during preseason camp, and I was one of the couple of people who tried to interview him, and he had very short answers and didn't seem very interested in wanting to talk to us. And I can understand that frustration as a junior who has high expectations for themselves that maybe isn't getting the playing time that they want or believe they deserve. So he'll see where he can land. I still think there's some talent in Jaden Mickey, and the fact that Notre Dame won't have him certainly stresses the level of which will be required from Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs. I'm curious, do you think so? Carson Hobbs has now moved onto the depth chart as Christian Gray's backup. Do you think that they should or could go more like field and boundary substitutions where Leonard Moore is Benjamin Morrison's sub and Carson Hobbs is Christian Gray's sub? Or do you think that Leonard Moore is more likely to be the next guy at either spot?
Well, they did trick you on that. They put out a revised depth chart and game notes like later this afternoon, and so Carson Hobbs is now listed behind Christian Gray. You had 8,000 things going on this afternoon, so I'm shocked. I would have been shocked if you actually saw that email. But to make a point, yeah, I think that they will. I mean, I think Leonard Moore could play either side. I think he's really good as a boundary, but he's played both sides in games this year. And I think he had somewhere around 23 snaps on Saturday. So he got quite a bit of playing time on Saturday. Carson Hobbs has been mostly training at the nickel. So him moving back out to an outside cornerback position will put a little bit more on his plate. And you wonder if eventually, especially if Tay Johnson comes back healthy, if they'll groom him as the backup nickel and let Carson Hobbs just kind of focus on being an outside corner. I think Leonard Moore is ready. I'm wondering if Leonard Moore by the end of the year would be as good as Jaden Mickey is now, because there's very high hopes for him. But he's still a freshman. I think Jaden Mickey still plays with some savvy of being a junior. As far as Carson Hobbs, I don't think he's ready for those kind of big time snaps yet. Otherwise, we would have seen a little bit more of him. So I think he's a talented kid. I mean, he played a lot of good competition. I interviewed him just before he enrolled in June. And there are a lot of good attributes. I just think he needs a little bit more time in the oven than Leonard Moore did. And again, I think the safety net of those other two transfers that have played the position before is somewhat comforting. But man, 4 cornerbacks is a really tight situation. They need the injury gods to be on their side.
Yeah, the reason I wondered if maybe there are more straight substitutions is that I think based on the way the guys were being used, I wonder if Notre Dame was hoping it could redshirt Carson Hobbs because he hasn't played in every game, whereas Leonard Moore has, and now I think there's no way that they can redshirt Carson Hobbs. So maybe to get him some more action. Now probably the Louisville game isn't the one that they try to do that in. Maybe there's some other games later this seasons where they can see Hobbs rotating in with Gray. But I do like Leonard Moore as the better option of those two, and I do have some confidence in his ability to step up. But it is a lot of pressure to put on him as a freshman. Certainly not quite as much pressure as Benjamin Morrison had as a freshman, and certainly succeed with that. So Mike Mickens, as has been the case many times in his career, is sort of accelerating the timeline for freshmen at the cornerback position. I saw a comment asking about if the injury bug bites, how hard would it be for Rod Hurd to switch back to cornerback? I think it would be difficult. I do think Hurd is the backup nickel as much as Carson Hobbs has been training there. I think Hurd is the backup nickel in reality. And so Hurd is certainly getting some inside cornerback reps versus outside cornerback reps. So I think he could do it. It just wouldn't be ideal. But then if that happens, then maybe Kennedy Urlacher is playing that third safety role more. I think you would probably you would cross train in practice and only do it in reality if it came to the point where you needed him to play out there with regularity. Because I think he's the role that he currently plays is important enough that you don't want to take that away from him either. All right. What before we move on from some of the Mickey stuff, what did you think of Freeman's view of Mickey's decision when he was asked about it?
I think it's one of the reasons why Marcus Freeman relates so well to his players and why he's able to manage the roster as well as he has. I think if you come out and you're really bitter about it and question Jaden Mickey's decision publicly, it really makes you look bad to recruits and bad to current players. And I think this is authentically who Marcus Freeman is. So it's not like he has to say, okay, what's the politically correct thing here to do? And his stance was that, Jaden has his reasons and I can kind of give my pitch on why maybe I disagree. But then once he's made the decision, I need to support him. And I think that was the right way to go.
I think this is when Freeman's when Freeman is labeled as a coach's or player's coach, this is why, and this is a good reason to be called that. I think too often, because especially when Notre Dame is losing games, Marcus Freeman is like labeled as soft because he's a player's coach, but I don't think he's soft. I mean, ask Adon Schuler if Coach Freeman is soft. So I think there is more of a hard-nosed mentality when it comes to playing the game of football that Marcus Freeman has as a coach than some people give him when he's failing. But I think this is the flip side of that. Like, this is how he treats players and sort of trusts the relationships he has with players, knows and understands like what can he, like, if Jaden Mickey doesn't want to be on the team the rest of the season, what's he going to do to change that? And do you want a Jaden Mickey that's not fully committed to your program on the field for you? Probably not. So I think this is the right way to handle it. And to be publicly supportive of someone who's planning to stick around and graduate from Notre Dame. I think that makes it easier to defend as well. So I think that combined with the conversation he talked about that you had with Adon Schuler, I think those are moments that Notre Dame needs to get in front of recruits. Like, this is how Marcus Freeman treats his players. And then you can have those guys sort of speak to, you can even have Jaden Mickey talk to him or Adon Schuler talk to those recruits. And I think that's a good thing for Notre Dame. Now, obviously there's bigger things at hand in terms of you got to win a game on Saturday. And if you can't do that, it doesn't matter how you treat your players. So there's a lot to get to this week, but I thought that was an interesting way. It's sort of interesting timing that this sort of happened this week, going into a big week. And I thought he handled it pretty well.
Right. And to be clear, people might say, okay, why the timing again? And Tyler, I think you might have touched on this. 4 games, you can play 4 regular season games and still preserve that year of eligibility. So he'll have 2 years of eligibility wherever he goes, provided he didn't play in another game. You can also play in postseason games without affecting your red shirt. That's new this year. You can play every game in the playoff and not have it affect your redshirt year, but 4 regular season games is the threshold, and this would be game number 5.
All right. Jeffrey Wong put this question in here, and it was next on our outline. So Jeffrey Wong, stop reading my screen. But Jeffrey asked, should I be worried about the tight end position with Cooper Flanagan being out? And Marcus Freeman announced today that Flanagan will miss Saturday's Louisville game with an ankle injury. How big of a loss is this? And do you think we see any of Jack Larson or just more of Mitchell Evans, Eli Raridan, and Davis Sherwood?
Yeah, well, we only saw, Cooper Flanagan has started every game this year, and in part that's because Mitchell Evans wasn't ready to go at the beginning of the year. But Cooper only played 4 snaps in the Miami game. So you got a sense of what Notre Dame will do in the Louisville game without him. We saw Davis Sherwood for the first time as an offensive player this season, and we actually saw a little bit of it's the guy that had the 3 injuries 3 years in a row.
Kevin Bauman.
Kevin Bauman. We saw a little bit of Kevin Bauman, but it's going to be the Eli Raridan and Mitchell Evans show. And I think they're in very good position from that standpoint, from a receiving standpoint. I think Marcus mentioned today there's Mitchell Evans is still easing himself back into being that complete tight end who's an outstanding blocker, and that's going to be coming in the coming week. So who becomes that? Is Eli Raridan that guy? Do you look at the freshman Jack Larson? Does Davis Sherwood fill that role? Can Kevin Bauman fill that role?
Mm-hmm.
So Tyler, what say you to all those things that we got such a good lead into the question from Jeffrey?
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have discounted Kevin Bauman when forming my question to you when I asked about Jack Larson. I think if he's physically ready, Kevin Bauman's a big guy, so if he can bring some extra help as a blocker, that would be nice. I think Davis Sherwood certainly does a lot of those things on the move, like when they put their tight ends in motion and use them sort of like H-backs. I think he's probably better than any of those other guys outside of Mitchell Evans or Eli Raridan when it comes to that. So I do think we'll see a lot of those top 2 tight ends. But the Flanagan loss is important. I think it limits your ability to do some things tight ends wise. He hasn't been as effective as a pass catcher as you'd like him to be. But he's done a decent job of blocking. I think both him and Eli Raridan have been a bit inconsistent as it comes to blocking. And so that will be even under a bigger microscope for Eli Raridan this week with Cooper Flanagan not available. So I think we'll probably still see Davis Sherwood in some roles. But maybe there's room for Jack Larson, because I think he's a pretty good pass catcher. But I would expect those older guys to get some more reps if necessary. What I guess specific to Raridan, what do you think of how he's played so far this season?
Of how Eli has played?
Yeah.
Well, he had the one big game where he kind of popped up there against Purdue when Notre Dame was using a lot of multiple tight end sets. And I thought, okay, here we go. And I'd say, okay, I expect a lot more out of Eli. He was a guy early in his career that I was kind of, standing on the table, banging my fist for. But his knee hasn't cooperated. He's had 2 ACL tears in the same knee, and he hasn't looked yet like the prospect that I think he can be.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting, Marcus Freeman's assessment about today. I think he kind of gave a generic answer, but in talking with Mike Denbrock, I think he was a little bit more revealing when we talked to him last Tuesday, and he does have high hopes for Eli as a receiver. I'm not sure that Mike views him as a guy that can be an elite blocker, but he does like some of the things he brings to the receiving game. When you talk to his teammates, they still call him a freak and some of the things he can do athletically. But I think Eli Raridan will end up having a better college career than Cooper Flanagan. I do. So I think somebody said the beat writers on the beat don't respect Cooper Flanagan. Actually, I do respect him a lot. He came in and as a freshman had way more impact than what his kind of recruiting vibe did. And I know Mike Denbrock thinks highly of him too.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that I wasn't. I was done.
Okay. I agree with you. I think there is more room in Eli Raridan's game to improve. It has been a little frustrating for him to not have quite tapped into all of that yet, and I understand the health concerns and limitations that have gone into that. I don't know. I think the ceiling is pretty high for Cooper Flanagan. I think that he very well could have a better career than Eli Raridan, so I don't know that I would buy that half of it just yet, but both of them have bright futures for Notre Dame. The thing with Raridan is if he can't be as helpful as a blocker, it's hard to run your two tight end sets.
Sure.
So I think that will, and that's a big way that he can get on the field more. They're not going to sub him in for Mitchell Evans as much as long as Evans is increasing his workload and feeling healthy, because I think Evans is one of Notre Dame's best players when healthy. So I think that Eli Raridan, if he wants more playing time, he's going to have to continue to improve as a blocker.
I'm looking real quick while you're talking about run blocking and how those two have done so far. And Eli Raridan is near the bottom of the Notre Dame list. So is Davis Sherwood, but Cooper Flanagan is pretty far down there too. Really, none of the tight ends have blocked at a high level and run blocking. Mitchell Evans would be the highest ranked of the guys that have played a lot. Bauman has, in his very few run blocking, which has been 20, he is by far their best run blocker. So maybe there is a role for him.
All right. Our last injury note is Joshua Burnham remains questionable with his ankle injury. How badly does Notre Dame need him this weekend against Louisville?
You know, Bryce Young is going to break out and be consistent at some point. When you look at his film grades, they're still pretty low, but you see these little bursts of really great play. You think it's just a matter of time. I think it's really important that Josh Burnham get on the field because RJ Oben did play a lot more snaps in this last game, as actually more than he had played in the two previous games combined. And you don't have the luxury of being able to bounce Boubacar Traore back and forth between those two end positions anymore with Jordan Botelho out for the year. So I think it's really important that Josh Burnham get back in there and play at a high level, because we're just not seeing RJ Oben close in on that breakout performance that kind of turned Javonte Jean-Baptiste's season around last year, where he went from being kind of an average player to being one of the best players on the team at any position.
Yeah, I think it would be an important addition. Tosh Baker, I'm trying to figure out I don't know that we can read into what the questionable tag means at this point, because Tosh Baker was available last week after being questionable. Jordan Faison didn't play against Purdue when he was available. So I don't know that you can rule out that Joshua Burnham will or won't play based on his questionable status right now. And as we learned last week, Marcus Freeman is unlikely to address his availability when we speak to him again on Thursday. So we'll find out for sure whether or not Joshua Burnham is ready to go on Saturday. He hasn't done much in pregame warmups in these previous games while he sat out. So we'll see if he's able to get some practice in this week and get ready to go, because I do think he is an important part of that defensive line when he's able to be out there. All right, Eric, before we get to some of the questions our viewers have submitted, can you tell them about our friends at Autograph?
Sure. You can now find Inside ND Sports content on the Autograph app, which is free to download on Android and Apple devices. The company, co-founded by Tom Brady, believes devotion should be rewarded and the future of fandom belongs to the fans. I got no argument with that. There are many cool tools and features in the app, including the daily replay, which summarizes the news from the previous day with links to content you might have missed. You can download, and we have a lot of content, so you may miss it. You can download the app using the QR code at the bottom of our screen or by using the link listed in the video description. From there, go find our content and our content only in the Notre Dame community. Make sure you use the referral code INDS, that's INDS, so Autograph knows we sent you, because they're not psychic.
All right, but I am psychic, so just let me know anytime, and I'll use those abilities. Scott Fegan asked questions. Let's get to some of our questions submitted. That may have been the least convincing 25-point win yet, but I do think Riley's strengths can win the Louisville game versus strong passer. Yes or no?
Okay, I think you made up a word there, but I know what he's saying. I think, Scott, when you look at this Notre Dame team and how it's constructed and so forth, the reason that Mike Denbrock wanted to have a guy like Riley Leonard is these kind of games. That you look at what Louisville was able to do against Notre Dame last year. They got 5 sacks. They forced 5 turnovers. Notre Dame rushed at a 1.6 yards per carry clip last year. They had their season low 44 rushing yards. It wasn't even close. They were able to shut down traditional running backs like Audric Estime, 10 carries for 20 yards. So can Riley Leonard make the difference in his skill set? I think him running the ball is part of that. So yeah, that is an answer to Louisville loading the box and constantly bringing pressure. But I do think this is also a game where taking some deep shots and completing them isn't just something that's going to make fans stop booing or fans argue less for Steve Angeli. I think it's functional in this game, but his running ability is going to play into the outcome of this game, I believe. And Tyler wants me to do the ventriloquist act again. Tyler said, "Eric, you're absolutely right."
Yeah, I'm really off here. I was jumping the gun. I wanted to admit my fudging the words for Scott Fegan. I wasn't sure what he meant with advice, so I said verse. I tried to guess what he was trying to say, but I think that Leonard's. I don't think that Leonard needs to be like Leonard doesn't have to throw for 300 yards for Notre Dame to beat Louisville. I know that's what needs to happen for people to get off his back, but I don't think that needs to happen for Notre Dame to win. So I think there is a good balance that Notre Dame can strike. I do think it really hurts Notre Dame that when he misses on those easy throws that he was missing on against Miami, Ohio, especially ones that are sort of him on the move, which is supposed to threaten the defense like that. You're getting more out of Riley Leonard by doing that. But when he's not able to make the throws when he's doing that, it's hard to sort of call those plays. So that is the sort of catch-22 that Notre Dame has found itself in. And we're still waiting for Riley Leonard to sort of have a complete game in all areas. And I don't know that he has to have a complete game in all areas for Notre Dame to beat Louisville. But you have to be sharp for the most part, and hope that Louisville has trouble taking him down, as many teams have so far. I'm not sure that Louisville's going to struggle as much as a Purdue or Miami of Ohio has. So you can't just rely on his running ability. You're going to have some well-timed passes thrown in there to keep the defense off of him. All right. Bob Alvey chimed.
Let me add real quick too.
Go ahead.
I mean, Georgia Tech just played Louisville. Haynes King has somewhat of a similar skill set of Riley Leonard, and I think you can get ideas from watching that tape what works and what doesn't work. I mean, Georgia Tech's receivers and line is different and so forth, but just from a quarterback standpoint, I think that's actually some pretty valuable tape. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Bob Alvey chimed in as well. Bob said, I know I'm in the minority, but I thought Riley Leonard had his best day in the passing game, climbed the pocket, threw downfield for touchdown, and several PIs, finished the game 11 of 14 or something similar. What are your thoughts?
I mean, from a statistical standpoint, from a pass efficiency standpoint, it was. And Bob, that's a pretty good memory. He was 5 of 10 at one point and then went 11 for his last 15. So he did kind of find himself afterwards. And you're right, those pass interference penalties were huge in all those drives. And that was 15 yards tacked on. Is there room for improvement? There's a ton of room for improvement, but I thought he played, and certainly in the running game. Let me tell you too about Riley Leonard's running. There's one quarterback in the country that has more rushing touchdowns than Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard has 6. Blake Horvath at Navy has 7. And there are 2 quarterbacks in the country that have a higher rushing yard per carry than Riley Leonard, 7 yards a carry. And that is Blake Horvath and Washington State's John Mateer. So he is doing some valuable things. But I think Mike Denbrock and Riley Leonard be first 2 to say he still needs to be better in the passing game. And that's why he's at Notre Dame. He wants to be better in the passing game.
And this is sort of the same thing, but I wanted to make sure we got a Jeremy question in here because Jeremy's a new name to the chat. Do we think Leonard is turning a corner, or is it more of an anomaly?
Well, the last 2 games he have been his best 2 statistically since early in the 2023 season when he was at Duke. So for me, I do think I see progress. When Tyler, you do the film review from this week, I'm sure you're going to see things where you say, okay, here's where he still needs to get better. And I think in your film review of Purdue, you pointed some of those out. But I'm seeing less of those, oh gosh, that guy was wide open and he ran it type things. And this Louisville game is going to be an important checkpoint for Notre Dame's offensive line, for Riley Leonard as a quarterback, and for Mike Denbrock as a play caller. All those things that we've talked about from preseason, this is going to get a fact check and a reality check on Saturday to see where those things stand.
Yeah, and I can't help but go back to when we talked to Mike Denbrock in the preseason, and he was comparing, I don't know if he was asked specifically to compare him to Jaden Daniels, but it was a Jaden Daniels discussion.
Oh, I asked the question. Do you want me to tell you what the question was?
Yeah, sure. If you want to.
Yeah, I said, do you see any similarities? Jaden Daniels, when he was at Arizona State, had a pass efficiency rating that's similar to what Riley Leonard's was when it was at Duke. And 2 years later, it went incrementally up his first year at LSU. Then he set the NCAA record in pass efficiency in his second year at LSU. Riley Leonard obviously is only going to be there a year. But I said, do you see some of the similarities in the process of the evolution from a guy who did not see the passing game like he did at Arizona State to a guy that set an NCAA record? And he said, yeah. He said that, the biggest adjustment for Jaden Daniels was trusting the people around him. He was so used to just tucking it and running it and doing it all by himself. And it took a while for him to use his legs to extend plays besides the running and trust his teammates to make the big play, to catch the ball downfield. And so, yes, there was a lot of similarities in what Mike Denbrock is trying to do with Riley Leonard and what he did do with Jaden Daniels.
Yeah. Apologies to Jeremy. Jeremy is actually a normal chatter. He just wasn't. He took his last name off his account, so I didn't recognize the name. So thanks, Jeremy. That was what I was getting at. That there has to be some trust, and that doesn't come automatically. As much as you want to believe in your guys, you have to sort of see it. And there was a quote Riley had after the game that the people that don't want to support Riley Leonard are going to pick at. And he said something to the effect that it helps to see, I can underthrow a guy and it's not going to get intercepted. They're going to make a play. They can get a pass interference penalty. And people are like, well, now he's just going to try to intentionally underthrow it. That's not, I don't think that's what he means. He means like he doesn't have to overthrow and not give the guy a chance. Because that's not doing anyone no good if you just keep overthrowing the deep ball and no one has a chance at it. You got to let the players make plays. And he's growing some confidence in guys, whether it's Mitchell Evans. Obviously, the Bo Collins one, there wasn't really contested. But Jordan Faison had one. Jaden Harrison had one. And those aren't even necessarily like, especially when you talk about Harrison and Faison, those aren't big players that you would expect to like make plays on jump balls all the time. So to get that out of those guys, it can build the trust that, hey, even if I'm not perfect, I don't have to fear that this is going to be an interception. And that can sort of unlock his ability and want to sort of let loose and throw the ball downfield.
And if you're wondering what play he was referring to, there was one where he threw it to Jaden Harrison, underthrew Jaden Harrison in the end zone. The defensive back had a great beat on getting an interception. Jaden Harrison reached over the DB and almost caught it. In fact, when they both kind of tumbled to the ground was when the DB kind of popped it out of his hands, but he almost made a touchdown catch, but he certainly kept the defensive back from making an interception.
Jimmy Page says, why doesn't Marcus Freeman give anybody some meaningful snaps at quarterback? It seems mind-boggling.
I'll let you go first with that.
I would just say that it is because the meaningful snaps that they have given the other quarterbacks came in practice, and then the decision was made that Riley Leonard was the better quarterback. You might not agree with that, but that's why it's done. Marcus Freeman does not see a benefit at this point to replace Riley Leonard. We're talking about Riley Leonard needing to have confidence. Like, I don't know that him getting pulled out of the game is going to help that. You could argue, well, maybe that's motivating him, but I don't think anyone that's around Riley Leonard thinks he's not motivated. So I don't know that would be like a trigger that you could pull that would make a Riley Leonard be better down the road by benching him to get him to where he needs to go. Notre Dame thinks he has the highest ceiling of its current quarterbacks for the 2024 season, and that is why. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, Jimmy, I don't blame you for being curious about Steve Angeli or even the other quarterbacks. I mean, Notre Dame has a really deep quarterback room. There's years where it's very clear that if quarterback 2, 3, or 4 were in the game, Notre Dame's chances of winning would not be very high. But I hope I can unboggle your mind here. Riley Leonard still needs these game reps. This is a quarterback that Notre Dame projects as being better in November than he is now. And every one of these reps is important. He wasn't on this team last year. He didn't have Mike Denbrock as an offensive coordinator last year. He wasn't playing in this offense, and he didn't have these teammates. And he didn't have spring football to give him 15 more practices to kind of ease him down that road and that timeline. And so game reps are important for him. You're playing for 2024, and this is who they've decided, whether you agree or not, that's who they've decided gives them the best chance to get into the playoff and win playoff games, is this quarterback. And so that's why you don't see them changing the quarterbacks and doing. And I would say, especially in this game against Louisville, that if you had a quarterback that does have some limited mobility like Steve Angeli, this is not the game to try that experiment.
Yeah, and I think you could argue that Marcus Freeman, at least compared to Brian Kelly, which are the two coaches that I've covered at Notre Dame, has been better about getting the backup quarterbacks into the game in blowouts now and earlier in blowouts. So like the Purdue game, Steve Angeli came in as soon as they started the second half. Yes, it was still lopsided, but that's still pretty early to put your backup quarterback in. So I think those are somewhat meaningful reps. Certainly Purdue, I think, still had its starters out there, and Notre Dame had the rest of its starters out there besides Leonard. So those are meaningful reps. If I know that's probably not what Jimmy Page is looking for. He wants them to be the reps that are earlier in the game when the game is still on the line, probably. But so I think it's just worth pointing out that Marcus Freeman does use opportunities to get guys in the game to give them sort of a better run of play once they get to the time that they're needed. So obviously, Riley Leonard is who they want to get the most playing time right now, and I think that'll continue to be the case until they feel like they have to make a decision otherwise. MJH Irish 84 says, I wonder what the odds are for Notre Dame going back to the portal for another quarterback next year, and we start this merry-go-round all over again.
If I were an odds maker, I would set those pretty low. And this is why Notre Dame has said that Marcus Freeman has said this is the last year that it would like to go to the portal for a starting quarterback. Now, does that mean there's zero chance? No, because things could change. But they feel very good about Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr competing for that 2025 spot. And then if Deuce Knight ends up signing, then you have a fourth quarterback. I don't think he would be a factor in that race, but that would give you another talented quarterback in the room and another reason not to go to the portal. What would be a reason to do that is if you needed a backup quarterback. Let's say Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchie both transferred, or even one of them, you may need from a number standpoint to go to the portal to get a backup quarterback. But I think they feel very good about one of those three leading this team in 2025.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you on all fronts there. Jeffrey Wong says, do you guys recall ND being penalized as much during the Kelly era? Are penalties a sign of a lack of confidence and of being unsure, trying too hard, or am I making too much out of it?
I'll let you go first on that one, and then I'll jump in.
I don't want to make a guess at whether or not they're being penalized more or less. I genuinely don't know the answer to that. I think that's a good question, and something I'd like to spend some time researching before having too strong of an opinion on it. So I think it's any number of things. I mean, on the offensive line, you got a lot of young players and first-time starters coming into this year, so you're getting some false starts, you're getting some holding penalties. And I think that's sort of to be expected. Now you want to get rid of those issues as the season goes on. But I think that has led to some of that. Otherwise, like, I mean, there's here or there, like the Adon Schuler one that we alluded to earlier, like that I think was an immature play. Like it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but Marcus Freeman has a policy in the program to hand the ball to the official. And that's not what he did. He handed it to someone or threw it in the direction of someone on the Miami sideline, and that caused a penalty and ruined an opportunity that Notre Dame wanted to sort of capitalize on in terms of getting the offense on the field again. So I don't know that you can sort of pin it on one thing because every penalty, I mean, if all the penalties were on the same player, then maybe you could pin it on the same thing, but there's a lot that goes into every single penalty and why it happens. It could be a lack of focus, could be a lack of discipline, could be a lack of experience. But I think what you'd like to see is as the season progresses, those instances to be lessened, and we'll see if that occurs.
Yeah, Jeffrey, I the big penalty total, the triple digits and penalty yards at Texas A&M, I thought made some sense. It was opening game with a lot of new starters on offense. You had the noise factor. But 100 yards in the fourth game of the season at home seemed a lot. And again, I don't think that, as Tyler went through, I won't repeat what he just said, but there could be a lot of different motivations. As far as how often during the Brian Kelly era, it was on and off with Brian Kelly. He had teams that were pretty high on the penalty scale and some that weren't. And it didn't always equate to winning, but it did equate to how purple Brian Kelly's face got at times. And when you look at a national scale, the team almost that always has the fewest is Navy. The team that almost always has the most is USC. So I think in USC's case and in Navy's case, that really comes down to discipline. But I think with the other teams in the middle of those two extremes, there's just a variety of factors.
All right, Bob Alvey has a couple of offensive tackle questions. From your eyes, is Anthony Knapp showing any improvement? From what I see, the pass pro from the left side of the offensive line is below average. I think it could be a reason why Riley Leonard rarely throws to the left side. And then his follow-up to that was, do you think a move of Lambert to left tackle might take place over the bye week?
Tyler looks at the film a lot more closely than I do. I looked at the Pro Football Focus grades, and Anthony Knapp has not graded better from his opening. In fact, he's gotten a little bit worse every game by their grading system. I don't know what the Notre Dame coaches are grading him. I asked about the offensive line in general today. Somebody later asked about Knapp and Pendleton. And again, I don't think Marcus is going to go into great detail there. But I have not seen improvement in Knapp. And was part of the question about Emil Wagner? Did I?
No, it was asking about Gerby Lambert moving to left tackle.
Okay.
During the bye week. And I don't know that he means to necessarily start, but at least to me, be in a position to start if Knapp isn't improving.
I mean, I think when you get to the bye week, if Knapp doesn't improve in this game, if you don't see improvement, I do think Notre Dame needs to look at the other alternatives on the roster and how they can make their offensive line better.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm not sure that there would be an instance where you would pull Anthony Knapp for Gerby Lambert this year, unless Knapp's play declines much more significantly. I don't think Knapp is playing like particularly poor. I think he's playing like a freshman left tackle. And I don't know if you put Gerby Lambert in, I think he might have some of the same hiccups. I think Gerby Lambert has the ability, maybe better physical gifts and size than Anthony Knapp. Although I guess I don't know necessarily if Lambert is stronger than Anthony Knapp, because Knapp is alleged to be a very strong player, and obviously that has to be the case if he's able to play offensive line at Notre Dame as a freshman despite his size disadvantage. I don't know that there's been like massive steps forward. I think it's been about the same, sort of the ups and downs. I think he had his good moments and his bad moments at A&M, and I think that's sort of continued throughout the season. I think there's certainly room for improvement there, and I would doubt that Anthony Knapp would tell you that he's like playing his best football yet. I think that both he and the coaching staff believe there's better to come from his play. All right, one more question here, guys. Who would you say is playing the best on offense and defense this year? Love, Watts, who has been the biggest surprises?
The best on offense, I would say it's been Jeremiyah Love consistently. The best on defense, definitely, I would say Watts, although I think there's a handful of guys that you could give that. But when you look at every game, Watts is playing almost every down in every game. He leads Notre Dame with the most snaps, and it's not even close. And he's been consistent every game, consistently good. Who has been the biggest surprises? Why don't you give your best and
okay?
Best
Yeah.
and I'll think of the surprises.
That's fair. Yeah, I think I would probably agree on Love. What really sort of irks me is that they can't get Love on the field on third downs, because his skill set should be tailor-made to play on third downs as long as he can pass protect, and they're taking him off the field on third downs, and that, like, you got to get better pass protection out of Jeremiyah Love and have a trust in him to do that more frequently, because third downs are critical downs and you're taking arguably your best player off the field. And that's tough to swallow. As for defense, I think you could probably have a toss up between Xavier Watts and Benjamin Morrison. Honestly, I'd hear an argument for Boubacar Traore. I know he hasn't played as much, like he's had less opportunities because he was backing up Jordan Botelho and now is into the starting role, but he is lived up to sort of the hype that we were giving him as someone that could be very influential on the defensive line. So those would be who I would go in terms of the best players. if you made me pick, I would probably go with Watts over Morrison, but I think it's a fair argument either way.
And then as far as surprises, I wouldn't say Emil Wagner because I was a big Emil Wagner fan going into the year. So I will say Jaden Harrison, just because I think he's contributed on offense more than I saw coming from him. And I think there's a lot left in the tank for him. And that he's getting this much play, I think, is interesting. On defense, I could say Jaden Osbury, but I liked him. So I'll say Adon Schuler. We knew in fall camp that he was going to play a lot, and he had, overtaken on the depth chart, a guy that we thought would start, and that's Rod Hurd the second. So I'll go with Adon Schuler, even though we saw that in August. I still think if you look at the whole picture of maybe going back to the spring, Adon Schuler being the surprise there. I haven't been surprised by a lot of people to this point.
You're just
I'm waiting for those surprises to happen.
You're just way ahead of the game. You know what's coming, and you've been trying to tell us all about it. On offense, I think maybe I should go Wagner because I was a little skeptical, or I just wanted to see what we've been told would happen. I think I would also put Bo Collins.
I set you up for saying Wagner when I said I was always a fan of his.
Yeah.
Discussion here. Okay, go ahead.
Bo Collins, I think, is the other person that's in that conversation. I wasn't sure if he could be the number one receiver for Notre Dame's offense, and I think he's sort of clear in a way is right now. Now maybe that changes as Riley Leonard gets more comfortable in the passing game, but Bo Collins, I think, has lived up to his sort of pedigree that maybe he wasn't necessarily always reaching at Clemson either. So Bo Collins deserves a nod there. In terms of defense, it's hard because there were so many known quantities on defense, and the guys that are stepping up, I think we anticipated. Like Christian Gray, it's not a surprise to me. I have had a lot of confidence in Christian Gray going into the season. Schuler was someone that, if you asked me in the spring, I wouldn't have. As the spring started, I wouldn't have believed you. But as we saw him sort of progress throughout the year, it became clear that he would be up there. I guess maybe in the back of my head, Drake Bowen is someone that is maybe nudging towards a surprise. Like I wasn't sure if he would get played off the field by someone like Kingston Viliamu-Asa, and that I think that was more that I had a lot of confidence in Kingston Viliamu-Asa coming in. But I think Drake Bowen has more than held his own, and has found a meaningful role in Notre Dame's defense. I've been impressed with his play this season. All right, let's get to some of the other things we wanted to talk about, Eric. We've talked. I think we've hit most of everything as it relates to Freeman's press conference. Oh, the one I don't know that we talked about Freeman yelling at Adon Schuler and how that all came about. Did you have an issue with Freeman's emotions in that moment, and what did Freeman's explanation of that interaction tell us about him as a coach?
I don't watch the TV copy when the game's going on. I know some people do, and the guy that asked the question does and listens to the TV thing. So I didn't see that live. And I haven't even seen it non-live at this point. But we almost lost our show. But I don't have a problem with it. And again, you don't know what's being said. You might not see the hug at the end of it or whatever. And so, no, I don't have a problem with him getting and being emphatic to a player about a mistake that really could have been very costly, because Notre Dame could have gotten the ball back and scored again. And that allowed Miami to hold on to the ball. So I don't have a problem with it. And I loved his explanation of it. He talked about his dad texting him about it, and that sometimes you have to coach guys hard. And one of the reasons these guys make a lot of money is they know when that's an appropriate time to do it and when not. If all you do is yell at players all the time, they're going to tune you out. Marcus does it selectively, and I think it has greater impact.
Yeah. The Schuler moment, it wasn't like he didn't like spike the ball or anything on the sideline. I didn't get a clear look of like who he was throwing it toward or where he was throwing it exactly.
He threw it to like a group of players on the Miami sideline.
Yeah. Well, I thought you didn't see it, so that's why I was trying to describe.
I didn't see the yelling part. I saw the penalty part.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't
see the yelling. I saw the penalty. I saw why the penalty was called.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, Freeman was, he was very vocal, obviously, and animated. And at the very beginning, when the camera panned to him, I wasn't sure if he was yelling at the official or Adon, and then it became clear that he was yelling at Adon. But yeah, I think he's going to get on guys, and it was a bad mistake, and one that was obviously preventable. And there is accountability within the program. Even if Adon Schuler is still being asked to go out there and play, you're going to get reminded that that's not what you should do. And obviously, if stuff like that were to continue, I don't know that Adon Schuler would continue to have the role that he has. But I liked how, at least from Freeman's telling of it, how Adon Schuler reacted to it and sort of owned his mistake and knew he shouldn't have done that, and was able to sort of own that. And then so because that was how Adon responded, Marcus Freeman was quick to sort of tell him after sort of yelling at him when they're on the way to the locker room for halftime that, hey, I appreciate you owning it. I love you, and let's do better in the second half. So it was a pretty good moment for Marcus Freeman, even though if you're watching on TV, you're like, oh man, I don't know. But I think some people might want that for Marcus Freeman too, with the way some of the criticism that we've seen of him goes. So I think it was an understandable moment and sounding like a meaningful moment all around. All right. There were a couple personnel usage things I wanted to get to tonight, Eric. Aeneas Williams with 15 snaps played more than Devin Ford, who had 10 in Notre Dame's offense against Miami. Do you think that we'll continue to see that moving forward?
I think Aeneas is making his case to do that. I know the coaching staff loves Devin Ford, loves his versatility, loves how dedicated he's been, and what an unselfish guy he is. But I think Aeneas does a lot of the things that Devin Ford does better. And so I'm curious to see how that plays out. But if I had to bet, I do think Aeneas is going to continue to expand his role.
Yeah, I would like, as I mentioned earlier, to be more Jeremiyah Love in some of those situations. Yeah. But yeah, I do think that we're trending in a more of an Aeneas Williams role than a Devin Ford role there. And I think it's important for that person, whoever it is, to have a threat beyond their blocking ability. Like they have to be a threat with the ball in their hands as a runner or a receiver. So I think that there's a belief that Aeneas Williams can be that. So that's why he's continuing to carve out some playing time there. The other thing that I thought was interesting as it relates to personnel usage was Notre Dame's wide receiver rotation was pretty evenly split among the top 6 options. Do you think that will continue?
For now, I think maybe as we get toward the end of the year, there may be some guys that earn more playing time and more trust. I think some of it is dictated by what you're seeing the opposition do and what their strengths and weaknesses are, because not all these guys have matching skill sets. For example, Greathouse is going to be better against some teams than Jaden Harrison because they have very different skill sets. And, I guess Bo Collins and Jaden Thomas, boy, I wish there was more of a role for Jaden Thomas because he's so reliable. But Bo Collins is kind of proving it. But I think over the time, especially if Riley Leonard gets comfortable with one guy over the other in those rotations, I think it may start to unbalance itself a little bit.
Yeah, I would have expected to see more separation in the reps that we have seen. Now, obviously, that it's hard based on the last two games when there was a blowout and then everything was split in this game. That what's it going to look like moving forward? I think Bo Collins certainly seems to be the one that's the most immovable from his role. I think he's going to continue to see a lot of playing time. Jaden Greathouse, I thought would have a bigger role than he has had so far. So I'm curious how that continues to develop. Jaden Harrison, they like to do some of the jet sweep motion things with him and then get him the ball in those scenarios, which I don't know that would be a strength for Jaden Greathouse. So I understand why there's some movement and some splitting of roles between those guys. The Chris Mitchell, Jordan Faison one, I think is the one that I'm not sure where that's heading. Like Chris Mitchell, I don't know that has sort of been as dynamic as promised or hopeful to be. Now, maybe that's more to do with the pass protection and Riley Leonard's inability to throw it down the field as much as they'd like to. And we'll see if that changes as they go forward. But we haven't had a good chance to see what Jordan Faison can do consistently in that outside receiver role because of his ankle injury that he missed time with. So I'm curious to see like how things shake out between the two of those guys. All right. Frank Sarah asks, whoops, this is a Joe Long one that I clicked on accident because it popped in. Another question, will Gabriel Rubio suit up this weekend?
He is on the unavailable list this weekend. So I would look for him to come back in the first game after the bye week. So that would be Stanford on the 12th of October. Unfortunately, we are very discouraged from being able to ask between Monday and Saturday about injuries and so forth. Maybe a long-term one like Rubio, we would be able to get away with, but they have this new injury policy. And in some ways, it really works for us. And in questions like this, it doesn't work for us very well. But when you think about the original timeline, they were thinking Louisville or Stanford. And with him absolutely out for this game, the earliest then it would be Stanford after the bye.
Yeah, and I don't know how close he is to playing then. Like if he's out this week, I imagine he's not practicing. So if the first time he's practicing is the bye week, that still might be a stretch to get him in for that Stanford game. We'll see what his availability is moving forward. But this weekend he will not be suiting up.
And he adds something at defensive line, but they're not hurting for interior defensive line players right now. But he certainly would add to it. That would be an upgrade at nose tackle.
All right, Eric, I think we're going to wrap it up there. As everyone should know by now, it's a good time to be a subscriber to InsideNDSports.com. So give us a try with a 30-day free trial that's exclusive to you, our folks here on YouTube. Use the promo code NDYT when you sign up to get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us on the Insider Lounge, which is where we spend a lot of our time. Our community shares all their opinions, and we drop our inside information there first. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you make it to the end of this video and you're not subscribed, please, you gotta be kidding me. Help us out here. It's free. Just click that button. Thank you for everyone who chimed in tonight. If you're watching this on replay, we want to hear from you in the comments as well. The rest of our schedule for the week as it relates to YouTube, we'll have our Inside Indie Sports podcast uploaded on Thursday. Place Your Bets will be coming Friday, and then Eric and I will share our post-game takeaways late Saturday night. And as always, check out our content on InsideNDSports.com and have a good week.